Okay. As you might have heard, this meeting is being recorded. We will be posting this to our previously recorded webinars as well. So if we do have to get started here, or when we do get started here in a few minutes, if anybody does show up a little bit late, anyone registered for this webinar will get the video directly emailed to them. And if you are not already registered, they will always have access to the pre-recorded or the recorded link on our website. We'll get started here in just a few more minutes. Thank you. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started for today. And we are running, for anybody who has joined us on webinars previously, we have previously used a different platform to run these webinars. So if you have any questions, it might look a little bit different, but please still feel free to either ask the question directly within the chat. They will pop up on my screen so I can read them out loud and we can address them right then and there. Or if you do have a mic, I can always unmute you, or you can unmute yourself and we can join in on the discussion. But today we're going to be once again going over QuickBooks Physical Inventory, and this is for QuickBooks Point of Sale version 19. Anybody still running version 18 or below, rest assured that the processes are still about the same, but it might look just a little bit different. And then just as a heads up to everybody, if I do go silent for just a moment, I'm just a little bit under the weather, so I'm muting myself, for the sake of the video, and I will be back momentarily if that happens. All right. So to start, there's a few things that we usually do to prepare for PI. Now, these things are optional, but would be best practice. And of course, that is going to be a backup of your system. So we definitely need a backup, and then an on-hand report. So we're going to take a quick minute and remind ourselves how to run a manual backup. So I already have my QuickBooks Point of Sale open here. And so this needs to be run on the server. Remember, we can't take a backup from a client workstation, as it does disconnect all of the client installs from the main server when you take a backup. So on our main server, we're going to come over here to File, Backup Data. And by default, of course, it will default to backing up to our default location. Normally, when you're running a backup on the fly, I like to run it to an alternate location just so I know exactly where it's dropping it. If you're not sure where the default location is dropping your backup, we can always exit out of here. Go over to Preferences, Company, and under Data Safeguard, this is under our General section. So we open to this every time, but Data Safeguard will show you exactly where it is being dropped off to. This is our default backup location here. For most people, that's somewhere on the C drive, but this is something that is changeable. So I can go ahead and put this anywhere I need it to be. All right. But backing up is always going to be step one. Step two is we run an on-hand report. Running an on-hand report prior to your physical inventory and then right after your physical inventory is going to give us, a good understanding of what our discrepancies were and kind of what the PI truly meant for us. And so in order to do that, I'm going to come over here to Reports, and we can go to the Reports Center. Now we do also have our items down here, and I have my inventory valuation. So I have it prompt to modify the reports before running. I find this to be the most helpful for me. And again, that's down here on the bottom left-hand side of the screen. That allows me to add or remove columns, ensure that I'm running it for the correct date. Basically, I can make sure all of my filters and the report is exactly what I need it to be before I waste the time waiting for it to run. Now, for right now, we're just going to hit run. And once you get all your reports where they need to be, that is just a check mark that you can turn on and off. All right. And so now that we have our inventory evaluation report here, I'd be able to print this or export this to Excel. Please remember that if you are exporting to Excel, then we have to have Excel on the computer that is doing the exporting. So it has to be installed locally as well. So online Excel will not work in order to go ahead and send this to Excel. See, if I hit send to Excel, it's exporting, and then it will open up an Excel sheet for me down here in a minute. I might actually have to cancel this. I have a rather large test database loaded for today, so this could take a second. All right, we're going to cancel that out for right now. And close. Actually, before we close out, again, if you've already hit this point and this is not exactly what you needed, you can always modify your report and get that add or remove columns back up onto the screen. Okay. That's it for our first step. We're going to back up an on-hand report, pretty straightforward. So test scanner if using. So there are a few different versions of scanners that will work for QuickBooks. And under our hardware setup wizard, we can get an introduction to at least, or into both of them. So physical inventory scanner. You can see prior to this, I had a Cipher Lab 8000 series loaded. There is also a MetroLogic scanner. Both of these scanners are plug-and-play scanners. So good news is usually if you just get the appropriate driver installed, it can see everything and everything's connected, no problem. Now, that's a perfect world. So of course, we're going to tell you, you want to test your scanner the day before your PI, usually at least the morning of, and give yourself plenty of time. If there's anything going on with the scanner, you do want to call in a big hairy dog and we'll get it working for you. Please remember that PI calls are always taken as down calls. So we'll make sure that you get somebody on the line with you so you can get right over to counting. Okay, so for right now, I'm going to go ahead and load that Cipher Lab scanner. And just to complete the testing here, I'm going to hit next. Now, unfortunately, I don't actually have the scanner physically with me here. So we're essentially just going to go through the paces so you guys know what this looks like. We're going to go ahead and say next. And depending on the type of scanner, it will have a few different options. So we're going to go ahead and say next here, but it's all basically the same. And QuickBooks does an amazing job of walking you through what you have to do. Step one, make sure that we have some data in there to actually upload. And step two, place it on the cradle, and you're going to select option to upload. And this is the screen that we're waiting for here. Connecting, press escape to cancel. And once you see this screen on the scanner, while the scanner is docked, of course, then we're going to go ahead and hit that begin test. That is essentially just the handoff between the two. We want to make sure they're ready over the pitcher's mound before we start throwing any scans towards QuickBooks. All right. And so, of course, we didn't get that connection. It doesn't see the scanner attached to my computer because, right now it's not. So it does go through a few more options of just ensuring that we have the right one. The screens do look a little different, but at the end of the day, again, it's the same exact steps. All right. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and one more time let this guy fail here. We're going to cancel. Now, I wanted to go ahead and let this fail because I did want to show you guys that going through QuickBooks here, it does ultimately open up your COM settings. So this is usually where people get into some trouble. Last year, it was set up as COM 3. The and this year we're using COM3 for something else, so we need to open it up to a different COM port. And this will allow you to change it right here. You don't actually have to go into Device Manager, so you can access this same sample area in Device Manager. You can actually use that Windows Device Manager button right within QuickBooks, and it opens it up for you. So this is completely separate from QuickBooks. It's opened up down here, and that is my regular Device Manager. All right, so QuickBooks is pretty powerful to help us here. We're going to go ahead and leave that for right now. And now we're going to go ahead and actually start this physical inventory. Oh, actually, I almost forgot. We have one more thing to talk about. So a zone map. A zone map is not required, but highly suggested. Give me just a moment. Let me go ahead and pull this guy up. All right. So this is one of our manuals for Retail Pro, but I do like to go ahead and pull this up. Actually, excuse me, this guy over here, because I wanted to show you that example of a zone map. We have a few versions of our PI manuals here. Oh, and there it goes. So a zone map is essentially just us taking our store and breaking it down into more manageable chunks. That way, if there is an error, if there is a problem with a set of scans, we don't have to dig through the entire store to figure out what that inventory scanning error was. At most, we're only digging through an aisle or maybe a few racks. So here we can see Riley's Fly Shop. It is a smaller store, really only 3 aisles and a handful of racks, front counter, and then some file space. But even in this small store, we've broken down into, what is that, 1, 2, 3, about 12 zones. All right. And that's going to make finding inventory errors super easy. There's only really 2 places to look in any given zone, 2 to 1 places to look in any given zone. All right. Now, one thing to remember is that the system does not have a way of knowing how you broke out your store. So we can spend that time building that zone map, but we still want to make sure that we are dealing with errors as they happen within the zone. Because if we let it go, if we accidentally scan more than one zone at a time, the system doesn't know, okay, well, which zone did that error actually come from? There's no way for the system to know that. All right. So let's actually start our physical inventory now. We've just kind of done a lot of prep work. We'll pretend that we've already separated our store into some zones. People know where they should be counting. And the biggest thing with zones is making sure that people don't accidentally double count. So my preferred method there is going to be the painter's tape on the floor, literal lines in the sand that you are not allowed to cross. All right, well, here we go. We're going to go to inventory, and then we're going to come all the way down to start physical inventory. It is just that easy to start your inventory at any given time. All right, so now that we're here, this is our physical inventory count window. So we can actually go ahead and directly type in under the counted column, or we can come over here to the I want to, and we have a few options. We can add counts by hand or add counts from a scanner. If you do not have a scanner listed at all, this will be grayed out for you. You will not have this option. I only have this option because I at one point used a physical inventory scanner, and the system remembers that. All right, but I'm going to go and show you the add counts by hand first. Now, add counts by hand is pretty straightforward. This is a manual entry of your inventory scans. So I can either type or scan directly into the enter items column. This is perfect for those times where you are, let's say you have QuickBooks open at your front counter and you're just scanning all of those little things that are at the front register, all the chapsticks and keychains, while people are out scanning zones using the actual inventory scanner. The other method, of course, we can go ahead and cancel out of here. I would be able to print my entire count sheet. So I can go ahead and edit whatever is on the screen here by right-clicking and customize columns. Remember, what is on the left is available, and what is on the right is currently visible. So these are the chosen columns. All right, let's say I don't really need all of this information here. I'm just going to double-click them to get them off of the screen. And I'm going to say this is going to help me a lot more. I have my item number, style number, attribute size, my expected, which would be my current on hand, and then my counted, what we actually counted for the day. Difference quantity, I know that this is going to be a blank field when I print it because there's no data in there just yet. ALU might help me figure out this item if I use alternate lookups, department, vendor, and maybe even last received. But other than that, I'm all set. So I'm just going to hit save. It's a little bit more manageable. Again, we can go ahead and print this. So I can print my PI worksheet for current item view. I can go ahead and also I have access to my differences and detail report from this screen. We haven't really started counting, so I don't care about the differences right now. All right. Now, if we were not using scanners at all and we were going the more manual method, I definitely want to print out my count sheet, and I can choose how that is organized. I might want to organize that by department or by vendor, but again, the system has no way of knowing what items are in what zones. So we do get that question, can I print this by zones? And unfortunately, the answer is no, but we try our best to get as close as possible with those departments. All right. For now, let's go ahead and add a few counts by hand. So I can go ahead and just type in the item number that you see in the background there. And right now, it is currently set up to go to quantity field. So as soon as I hit enter, it's going to highlight my quantity option. As a default, it does default to a quantity of 1. So if I'm just moving fairly quickly, I can go ahead and enter in that next one. 251 and enter. So you see it does list it as 2 separate line items, but if I were to save this, it does consolidate my counts for me. So don't worry that it's not consolidating it right there on the screen, but what we also could have done, of course, is instead of doing that is just change the quantity at the top. So those are the 2 options. So add item and then quantity fields. And if you notice, whenever we have the add items, you will not be able to toggle the unit of measure for the items. So for most people, this is totally fine. For most people, we might not be utilizing alternate units of measure. But keep this in mind if you are doing things like you sell in the pound and you purchase in like the kilo, anything like that. That's a good example of a time where you might need that granularity so you can set the unit of measure. All right. Now, for right now, I'm going to go ahead and actually one last thing. It's a little bit small here, but if you have made a mistake, perhaps, oh, we already put this in, I just needed to add a quantity of 1 instead of a quantity of 3, I can just directly type into counted, and it's going to go ahead and change that for me. That's all I need to do, type over the counted. I can also remove the item if I wanted to. So you just want to make sure you're highlighted on the item and then you hit that remove item. It's a very straightforward process when you're adding them in by hand here. Now, add counts from scanner is actually, in my opinion, an even more simple process. So via the scanner, and again, depending on the type of scanner, whether that's a Cipher Lab or a MetroLogic scanner, how you grab the scans are going to be a little bit different. So with the Cipher Lab, I believe it's just a blue button in the very, very middle. I think MetroLogic might be a yellow button. But if you rent scanners from us, we'll be sure to go ahead and let you know what that looks like. We give you a call we usually set up an appointment prior to your PI so we can make sure the scanners are working, that everything's installed, and you can get that opportunity to ask a few questions if you have any. And again, QuickBooks does an amazing job of reminding you what needs to happen before you can upload these scans. In fact, this actually is something that you can't get rid of. Even though this is the 15th time I've run a PI, it's still going to show me all the steps. So we're going to go ahead and hit next. And we're getting that same thing that we saw in our hardware setup wizard. It's going to remind you to make sure that that cradle is docked. You hit the upload button, and there you go. We should be expecting this connecting. Press escape to cancel. All right. Now we're going to go ahead and hit next. And of course, we have a little bit of a problem. I'm just going to hit OK. So we have a problem because I don't actually have a scanner connected. Well, what would happen here is we essentially get this exact same window. Excuse me, I meant my add counts by hand. We get pretty much this exact same window with all of our inventory counts already loaded. The only time we would have an extra option here, really a secondary tab, is if we do in fact have a scanning error. So let's take a quick minute to talk about that. So our MetroLogic and our Cypher Lab scanners are what we lovingly refer to as dummy scanners. They are going to scan whatever barcode you put in front of them. So if we accidentally scanned a pack of gum instead of the item we were pointing at or trying to hit, that pack of gum, in all likelihood, does not exist in our inventory. And so the system is going to pull that out. And so what it does is it actually has a secondary tab here that says errors, and we're allowed to go to the errors. There's not much that you can do about a scanning error. We just scan the wrong number. Ultimately, we just have to get rid of it, but we have to then go find that item and make the correction. And this is another reason why our zones are going to be so important. If I only have one little area to look through right here, this orange area, that is so much easier than looking through my entire store. And I'm going to go ahead and utilize this to kind of show you this inventory error. Like I said, I know this one is for our Retail Pro, but the example is the same. So what the system will do is it will give you the good item right before the scanning error. It'll give you the error, and then it'll give you the good item right after the scanning error. So that way I know that, well, this is zone A, and it's in between my flower plate, garden ribbon, whatever this is, and my tufted vinyl storage bench. I only have one tufted vinyl storage bench in that area, so this inventory error is going to be really easy to find. Now, of course, they're not all going to be that easy. We might have both very, very generic items there, but again, going to a smaller zone is just always going to be easier. All right, let me go ahead and add just a few more here. I'm going to add these in manually. Okay. Now, when you are processing manual scans like this, when you're adding them by hand, it is impossible for us to actually end up with inventory errors. And that is because the system gets the chance to double check as you are typing them in. So that's why we got this item is unrecognized for item number, UPC, or ALU. Those are the three fields that we are looking up when we are scanning items into our physical inventory: item number, UPC, and alternate lookup. Okay. So let's go ahead and save what we got so far. And as you can see, we're just building this down. Again, I don't necessarily need to go into that window if I am putting these in by hand. I can just type them in. All right. Over here under View, we have all items. I can go ahead and take a look at my counted only or my differences only. And I have access to all of the filters that are within inventory. So if you take your time and you've built out a lot of filters to help you better navigate inventory, you're going to be able to use them in your PI, and they can help save you a lot of time. This is also a great way to pre-filter before you print out, so I'd be able to have people only check my mends, and we can run cycle counts this way as well. Now under the I want to, besides our add counts from scanner and clear counts from scanner, which actually we did not talk about, so let's talk about that for a moment. So for the clear scans from scanner, again, it's essentially just going to walk you through it. There's actually not a digital way of clearing those scanners from the Cipher Lab. You can digitally clear them from the MetroLogic scanner. But here from the Cipher Lab, it actually just walks you through the process of doing it yourself on the scanner. So 1, turn it on. 2, get to that main menu, utilities. Tells you select on utilities, then select 3, delete data. And this is what your actual Cipher Lab scanner screen will look like. You hit next, and you say yes, all data. This is actually how we would also clear out the last scan. So if somebody just accidentally messed something up, they know that they did this. Instead of waiting to fix it when we get here to our physical inventory screen and upload that bad scan, just have them go through the same exact process and delete the last one they just did. All right, and here we can go next. And again, there's really nothing for me to actually do here electronically, so that's why it's totally fine for us to keep going through the entire thing. And then this reminds you that that bottom should say 000. That is your total scans for this session that you're currently on. So this one has 0 scans, perfect to start that next zone. And we close it. QuickBooks didn't really have anything to do. All right. Making sure to clear your scans from your scanner is a very key part of anybody who is using scanners. Otherwise, we're going to inevitably double up our scans, right? Now, of course, we can show last physical. So show last physical means literally the last PI that you guys ran if you wanted to see what that was. Revert to last save. So this is something pretty nifty that I don't think a lot of other softwares have as easily available, but we are able to save and continue here. So normally I tell people save and continue after each successful zone. That way, if the next one that you upload is an unsuccessful upload, I'd be able to, I want to, revert to last save. Maybe somebody forgot to clear the counts before they started the next zone. So when I uploaded it, I doubled up all of zone B, right? Now I got to revert to last save, but I'd rather revert to last save and recount zone C than have to recount A, B, and C. Of course, in the event that we're not quite sure when it happened, or if we just have not gotten a chance to save and continue, we can always clear counts and restart. It is very, very easy to do, though probably not as easy to go ahead and go through and recount all the zones. Now, under Run a Report, this is, again, our PI worksheets, detailed differences report. Again, we don't care about the differences until we know that we've successfully uploaded all of our zones. That's really the only time you guys should look at differences. Now, from this report screen, we still also have access to our previous detail report from our last PI and our differences report from our last PI as well. Okay, let me go ahead and just add a little bit of data here. All right. Now that we have just a little bit of data, sorry, I'm not sure if this is if you guys are seeing the physical inventory Teams logo here, but let me move it out of the way. So now that we got a little bit of data, our totals are starting to kind of just fill themselves out. More than expected, of course, is going to show up in green, and less than expected is going to show up in red. Now, right now, we can see that we've skipped over a few. We don't have information for most of it because I haven't put anything in. But if this was the complete end of our PI, oh, excuse me one moment. Okay. So if this was the end of our PI and we are accepting of any differences or discrepancies, we want to make sure that we set all items not counted to 0. So you only want to do this when you are at the end of your PI and only if you have counted your entire store. This is what's going to correct all of your negative quantities. We can't count a negative. If there's -1 in your store, that usually means there's actually nothing in your store and we've oversold at some point. Setting all items not counted to 0 is going to correct that negative and bring that back up to 0, of course. All right. Under the I want to, let's run that differences report really quick. And again, I am set up to allow me to make these changes prior to the report running. So at this moment, I'd be able to add or remove columns. And I can just double check that everything I want is on the screen. And actually, I do want vendor code. Actually, perhaps I want vendor name instead and department code. Go ahead and get all of that information, and I'm going to hit save. And now we're going to hit run. Again, rather large testing database here. But there we go. Now we can see the differences. And they will go in ascending order. So that's why we're starting with our negatives. And then at the bottom of my list is going to be my largest discrepancies. Now I can go ahead and change that order by just clicking on the little green triangle at the top. There we go. Remember that anything with a little blue dot in front of it can be sorted in that column. And if I click that again, see, it just changes the sort on it. But I can sort it by style if I wanted to as well. All right, let's go ahead and close this. I can print that if I need to and send people to recount where I need them to. Again, I might not need to waste the manpower recounting a few chapsticks, but if it's an item that costs me a few $100s, I'm definitely going to have someone double check that. But once I've double checked everything that I can, and I have to just accept what is not there or accept those differences, we've done all of our due diligence. Now we get to apply our changes to inventory. Apply changes to inventory means I am done. This is my new on hand. What is counted is my brand new on hand for my entire store. All right. And it does give you that moment to remind you that this is going to create an adjustment memo. At the end of the day, your physical inventory tool is just a fancy way of making an adjustment memo, a giant adjustment memo for your entire store. I'm going to say yes for right now. Well, this might take a second because, again, the larger trading database here. All right, but all in all, it still created just the one quantity adjustment memo, and we're going to hit OK. Now, at this point, it gives you another opportunity to run those reports if you've forgotten them. So you can go ahead and run your differences report or run your detailed report. And of course, now it gives you a little blurb to remind you kind of what the difference is between the two. Difference only versus all items. So let's go ahead and run that report. All right, perfect. So let's go ahead and just hit that preview. This was trying to go ahead and throw that into a PDF for me. I just need to preview it, and this is pretty much everything that I have, all of my differences. All right, let's go ahead and exit out of there. And you are done. Once you are completely done and you've updated your PI, it kicks you out back to the root of your main menu here. And we can go back to our inventory, and I can go back and I can start a brand new physical inventory if I wanted to. For right now, I'm actually going to go ahead and jump into quantity adjustment history. Because again, this physical is just a giant adjustment memo. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. Let's go and change this to all quantity adjustment memos. Actually, we really don't need all that. Let's just look at today. Okay. So looking at today, we can see that the reason is your physical inventory, and we didn't have to set that up. The system took care of that for us. But if I go ahead and edit this quantity adjustment memo, really, I probably just want to print this or review it. Editing an already updated quantity adjustment memo is usually going to be a no. If you wanted to go ahead and make a correction, we can always just create a brand new quantity adjustment memo and give it that same exact reason. So let's say there is a little bit of a correction that we have to do. Let's go down here. I did have item number 12787. So I'm going to go ahead and say I want to. And instead of reversing the memo, because it's only one that I need to do, we're going to go ahead and hit the new quantity memo. Reason code. If you don't see the reason that you need here, we can always create new reasons within our company preferences. And PI correction is definitely one of the reasons that I'd like to go ahead and create. For right now, I'm going to just use the quantity adjustment reason. I think that one was it. All right, we're going to say that this one was it because this one also has an on-hand quantity of 0. Under new quantity, I'm going to type in the 4 that was supposed to be there originally. We didn't count it. Perhaps we found it in a box in the back after counting was all done, and we're just adding that box back to inventory. Under comments, I can go ahead and call this my PI correction. Maybe corrections if I have a few of them. But again, no need to reverse the entire PI adjustment memo just to correct a handful of items. We'll just build a brand new adjustment memo. Now I can go ahead and save only or save and print. For now, let's go ahead and save only. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, can I just edit that in my item list? And with somebody who has the proper permission, someone like maybe sysadmin, and currently I am signed in as sysadmin, absolutely be able to do that. So I can go ahead and just find the item, hit that quantity of 2, and arrow down. The system will still have my back and still creates that audit trail for me. So I still have my adjustment memo created. This time the source was in my inventory, and the reason was the item was just edited. But now I have 3 different reasons that I'm using, all for this one kind of PI. So it does make reporting a lot harder to track, right? It's not that clean of an audit trail if we're using different reasons and different sources. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. All right, let me go ahead and go back to our little agenda here. So we already talked about basic zones, downloading versus our manual entry. We talked a little bit about bad scans. Again, it's going to give you this good scan right before and the good scan right after. And if you have multiple errors, it's going to do that for you each time. Now, updating the PI, we already talked a little bit about discrepancies. We're only checking them at the very, very end once you are done counting completely. And we know where we can run that, either under the I want to PI reports. You can actually also get prompted to run them at the very end. But please be aware that at the very end, it does give you the option to say, do not show me again. So if last year we clicked do not show me again, it would not prompt you for those reports this time around. I always say play it safe, go through the I want to route, and just get your reports. I'm going to remind you guys one more time, even though we've already updated that PI, I can always go to physical inventory, and we're just doing it from here because, again, we're kind of in that mindset. I want to, and we still have access to our previous report, so I can still run that previous detailed report or discrepancy report, whatever we need. All right, and you'll notice that it ultimately opens up a tab here in my report center. So if I go to my all reports and I go to my item reports, let's go ahead and take a look at, I can run a quantity adjustment report as well for these inventory items. I just have to make sure that I am searching for the appropriate reason. Filter data, and under reason code, I'd want to type in that physical inventory. Okay, this is another option to get the same type of information there. Okay, so let's go ahead and close this report. We can close that. We don't actually need to start a physical inventory here. Under reports items, we also get that same information, those adjustment summaries. And then I can also, from here, without needing to go into my report center, run that inventory evaluation again. So with this, my differences report, it's pretty clear there was my original, prior to running PI. The differences report's going to highlight what we actually did within that PI, and then our second inventory evaluation is going to highlight what our current on hand is after that PI. All right. And then, of course, we went through our updating. That was fairly simple and straightforward. You just want to make sure that we are paying attention to how we are counting, whether that's our entire store or if we're doing something like a cycle count, as I mentioned. And how we are counting is going to determine whether or not we need to set all items not counted to 0. Remember, if you're doing a cycle count, we are not using this button. If you are doing a full and complete inventory, then you are using this. That is going to correct all of your negative quantity items. All right, let's go ahead and close that. And then, of course, we would just apply our changes to inventory. And we talked a little bit about what we do for correcting after the fact. We can do that via an adjustment memo. We don't necessarily need to go ahead and reverse the entire PI. We can always just edit on hand as well. Editing on hand does depend on whether or not you have the permission to do so. People like sysadmin, owners, managers usually do. Average point of sale associate probably should not have permission to edit on hand. Creating adjustment memos also do rely on permissions, so be sure that if someone needs to create that document type, that we've allowed them to do so within our employee security. All right. And so that is about it for our QuickBooks point of sale PI. Like I said, I know this is a new format that we're trying here. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to either raise your hand, you can send an emoji, or you can go ahead and type directly into the chat. We'll be able to answer any of your questions. So I'll hang out for a little bit if anybody does have any questions. And if not, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm Liz with Big Hairy Dog. I'm one of the trainers here. And this has been Physical Inventory using QuickBooks Point of Sale version 19. Thank you so much. All right, so it looks like most people have left the meeting already. So again, I'm going to thank you so much for taking the time to spend this morning with me. I know it wasn't a super long, but good news about QuickBooks is that things are pretty straightforward with QuickBooks for the most part. If you are using scanners, again, friendly reminder to test those scanners the day before, hopefully, so we have more than enough time to make sure you're up and running before your PI gets started. And if you guys have any questions about renting scanners, please feel free to give us a call at 800-377-7776 and just let them know you're interested. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great one.